Well, folks, here we are with Aristo, as you can see, and this is our video for the 22nd of November, and it's called Chess Game Psy-Ops. Aristo, please take it away, and thank you for being with me.
Thank you for having me, Ron. We were running late a little bit today because of various issues and computer issues and stuff like that. So I guess this video will be on tomorrow. And once again, because of these issues, I had something else planned, something else I wanted to actually talk about based on the video from yesterday that Ron did, which I don't even remember. I commented on.
Neither do I.
Yeah. Something about, is God a omnipotent, omniscient, something like that to that respect, but not to take it to religion again.
Artificial intelligence war on free thought was the
exactly. And it does, however, blend into what we want to talk about today, because when I came on, Ron says, have you heard the news? There's big lots of stuff going on in the world today, as usual. And he told me about all of these pending arrests again and pending investigations and how Trump is draining the swamp. And again, if you look at some of the internet with the group of people that are called liberals, for example, by this other group of people they call alternative right, they are completely anti-Trump. Again, we are speaking usually of the Western, the USA sphere, the sphere of the United States. And because we're English-speaking peoples, the sphere of the United States is a grand influence, but it's not the whole world. Again, American politics allegedly does influence the whole world very greatly. On the other hand, I very much believe from what I've observed is that we are not in the 20th century global scenario anymore. It's not the Cold War. It's not America placing banana republics everywhere. That scenario is the old script. And in fact, we are now living a series of scripts, a series of theatrical dramatic presentations that in the military are called psychological operations or psyops. These psyops are meant, in my honest opinion, to preoccupy our thought process so we do not think for ourselves, so we do not really connect the dots, because there's so much information out there that either you're going to depend on somebody else to clarify and spoon-feed it to you through some sort of media outlet or other, or you are going to scan and research yourself. However, you need to be able to collect the factoids from the stream, the little fish from the big, raging, muddy river of goop, information goop, and you need to collect them, and you need to recognize them as edible, and you need to put them all together so they clump up into a bigger fish, into something much more digestible, meaningful, and to be able to connect the dots yourself. You will not be able to prove anything because unless you are there on the scene, you cannot corroborate anything. You will have to otherwise take it on the authority of whoever is talking to you. Now, are you sure that authority is reliable? Sometimes you say, they can't be, I know them. Well, they may have been reliable yesterday, but today they may have been blackmailed or whatever. That can happen, and they may not be reliable today. Even the most reliable media outlet of the so-called alternative media, because yes, I do not believe we have to resort to saying it was all planned from the start as some game. Some people did plan things in think tanks, but there are people who wanted to come out as alternative media. Some of them for profit, some of them for ideology, some of them because they needed to speak, or had personal gripes with the system. It doesn't matter, and the internet allows us to do so. And the first thing we ask is, why is the system facilitating our ability to protest through this specific outlet, whether it's the internet and all these private TV channels and this and that? Because they can keep tabs on us. And are they keeping tabs on us in the old-fashioned way, the 20th century way? In the old-fashioned 20th century way, when somebody kept tabs on you, whether you lived in a communist country or McCarthyist America or whatever, it meant you were going to be visited by the authorities at your door, either incarcerated or reprimanded, or something else was going to happen, or blacklisted or fired from your job in the case of 50s America, or something else, or your reputation would have been ruined. Back in the 80s, there were people who did cater to conspiracy theories and were vocal about it, and their lives were destroyed. They didn't have to kill
them. Some of them were killed.
Some were killed, the ones that were more persistent. However, in the 21st century, that only operates for people who do already have a voice in the collective that is reliable. The reliable people are being killed. Celebrities are dying seemingly from natural causes, and I bet many of them are, but some of them within the bunch who are actually vocal and influential, they may be snuffed out or encouraged to die through some kind of pharmaceutical means, because they might actually come out and say something at some point. Their psychological profile might say, you know, these people may not be speaking today, but tomorrow it's a good chance that they will be, and we don't want people to associate their death with what they just said yesterday. We want them to associate their death with nothing in particular except an alleged drug habit or I don't know what. So we have to be clever, and we have to be very careful. Now, when the same pattern happens over and over and over again, we need to ask ourselves, why are we falling for it? Or perhaps the thing is, well, that somebody may lie to us 10 times, and then the 11th, just for fun, they might tell us the truth, and just to see how we're going to react. So in the 21st century, the chess game is not about locking most people up. Surveillance is not about, in my honest opinion, finding out who the traitors are and weeding them out. Surveillance is about statistics. It's about finding patterns of societies. We are grouped. All they have to do for individuals is just block your computer or whatever. But the thing is, even that is too much. I mean, there's too many people out there. Too many people are connected. Everybody's got a cell phone. Everybody's got a computer. Everybody's, you know, at least in the part of the world that speaks English and considers itself not quite, you know, not just English, but Chinese, Japanese, Indian, you know, we're talking about large populations, Spanish, you know, parts of the world where actually there is a lot of electronic communication going on. Actually, the whole world, all the languages, most countries, even in Africa, they're passing out computers to people, you know, in India, little laptops. So everybody's connected. So everybody has a say. And so the artificial intelligence that is running the show, as you say, for example, in the last video, is not going to pick up every Tom, Dick, and Harry from the stream of information and label them. What they're going to do is pick out the Toms, the Dicks, the Harriets, the Susans, you know, all of them, and pick them out of any language, of any nationality, and put them into the general equation, because then they know how to make the next chess move. When you have a chess game of us against them, first of all, there really is no us. I mean, we can consider it that way, but technically there's you, there's me. In my perception, I don't see an us as an entity. It's a mathematical concept. So it's a theoretical concept and a sociological concept. It's meant for those who model human behavior on the social scale, so they can manipulate it, so they can control it. And these people, if we were truly individuals and unconditioned, we would not be controllable. But since we are subject to a social matrix that tells us how to behave, what to do, social memes, who promotes social memes? I mean, these are in the service of the system. It's not like it is said that these pop up spontaneously, and yes, maybe some of them they do because people like to belong. They like to be on the side of where the majority is and to be trendy and all of this. This isn't anything new. Long before there was any internet or electronics or anything, people love to be trendy. Religions wouldn't be popular if that wasn't the case.
Exactly. That's exactly the normal human predisposition, is to join with people that agree with you.
Exactly. It's the herd mentality or the tribe mentality. You know, it's right. Okay. I mean, but in nature, herds of humans are not thousands and hundreds of thousands and millions. They're just groups of 30 or 50 people at the most. They're small groups, and each person knows the other people more or less. Close-knit families, there's a togetherness, it's a whole different story. So of course you want people to agree with you there because you have to get along. So there's a common consensus of behavior, shall we say. Even in certain primate societies, you have clans of primates, I don't know what they call it, groups, families, you know, whatever. Some of them are very harmonized, peaceful. Others are just marauding, you know. Basically, they go and murder other primates. There's one kind of, I forget what the name is in Africa, I guess, a certain primate that's like a chimp, but closer to a human being. But these kinds are like two kinds. You have the one kind that has built that's in groups that are very peaceful and nice.
Very docile.
And the other one, yeah, and the other ones basically run around, and when they find another group of primates, they kill them. They slay the females. And then you see this also in indigenous tribes in South America and other places too. You got a large portion of villages, of tribes, of settlements where everybody is loving and docile and peaceful and they get along and all of this. And then you have another one that are aggressive and murderous cannibals, for example. When Columbus came to America, he just happened to stop on an island of the nice people. And they would say, yeah, the other islands, they're full of cannibals. So sometimes we have agreements, but sometimes they come and they massacre half the tribe and whatever for their whatever rituals. There's a kind of balance, I guess. But Columbus, if he landed on one of the other, like Magellan, when Magellan was doing, he was Spanish, I guess, and he did the first one, he did the.
Yeah, he went one way one time and the other way the other time, but he actually went around the world, but not one trip.
Oh, really? Well,
that's the way I understand it. One of his trips went east and one of his trips went west.
Oh,
and it met somewhere in the Eastern Pacific, Eastern Asia, the Western Pacific.
Else. The way I know Magellan is that he left Spain and went down to the Cape of Good Hope and then went up the Philippines. When he hit the Philippines, he was killed, and so were most of his people. And the ones that were left over managed to just go down only one ship came back.
But he had already been to the Philippines in the other direction, the way I remember it.
Oh, I
could be wrong.
But
it's the way I remember it, and my memory isn't always perfect.
Yeah. I heard that, on the one last trip, he made it to the Philippines, and he was killed by a marauding, very aggressive natives. But other people that traveled found peaceful natives. See, it was just the luck of the draw for this guy. And it could have been like that for Columbus. All of his people could have been massacred. What I'm saying is that human groups it's wholly different in a natural scenario where small human groups are there to get along. And if you're gonna basically get along, if the spirit of the group is psychopathic, you're gonna have a little psychopathic parasitic group, or you're gonna have a peace-loving group. However, when you have hundreds and thousands and hundreds of thousands and millions of people in the group that have that same instinct to get along, you can't separate the psychopaths in one portion and the docile people in another. It's really, really hard. And there would be mass confusion. What would happen, in my opinion, would be a percolation where subgroups would be created. And so we would learn to deal with these in some way. That's why you have governments and constitutions and this and that. But what if some of the subgroups would be automatically hardcore psychopaths? And this would have occurred from the very beginning of civilization. The very beginning of urbanized society, these clever psychopaths would come together and say and recognize each other, especially if there was a lot of trade going on, and eventually they would alter society because everybody else would be clueless. And now it's come to the point where it is a science. So if you have thousands of years, let's say 10,000, 5,000, let's go for normal history, 5,000 years of rulership that is essentially power-driven. You have people murdering their relatives. Now, somebody murders somebody in order to gain kingship. They are psychopathic by definition. If I go and kill my boss to get his job, I'm a psychopath. I'm not going to be considered ambitious. Oh, he's just ambitious, Well, different rules apply for royalty, obviously. So the thing is, the rule is psychopathy, and psychopathy is hereditary, and it is also conditioned. So what I'm saying is that if you think that we live in a world where the cabal is just a tiny group of people who yesterday decided to make trouble, if these people are there for thousands of years, how did this counter-revolution form from the system itself? They don't allow that. You can't make a move from when you're a tiny little toddler in their groups. They have ways of controlling, because there have been revolutions and counter-revolutions constantly throughout history. At some point, they kept tabs on all of this. They kept records. The whole idea of having historians is a form of surveillance for the psychopath. The whole idea of having anthropology and sociology, you see the sciences, all of a sudden, religion was chasing people who were scientifically minded, burning them at the stake, or whatever, and then all of a sudden it stopped. And we assume it stopped because people wised up. The reason it stopped is because the rulers and everybody else, and even the church itself, saw that they were far better served through the scientific method than through keeping people superstitious. Because first of all, scientific method created advanced weaponry. And so they could have wars that they couldn't have before on the scale, conquests. Raw materials could be taken. They could do a whole bunch of things. And then the sky's the limit. When the 1800s came around, people were dreaming of the stars already. And when you have the ruling classes dreaming of the stars, they did not dream about some kind of freedom, Republican exploration dynamic of, let's save humanity. They dreamt of what planet am I going to own, and what planet is my cousin Wilhelm going to own, and how are we going to duke it out in the wars of the solar systems, and who knows what. And by then, maybe we can actually learn how humans really take, so we can control them all with a snap of a finger and be like gods. We're talking ambition here. When you dream of a peaceful planet, the psychopath dreams of being God. That's it. The whole myth of Lucifer is basically the story of, on the one hand, you have somebody who, because the myth of Lucifer has two sides. On the one hand, you have the side of somebody who denounced the authoritative control of this divinity, allegedly. And on the other side, you have this psychopath who just wanted to take over the natural order of things. So, you can view it from either way, and it depends on whoever it serves, how you view the story. So let's go back to the chess game. Whenever you look at the news, you ask yourself first, okay, why am I responding to this? What is my response? That's how discernment works. Discernment isn't just, oh, I know this is wrong. Oh, I know this is right. It doesn't feel right. It's a little more complicated than that. Somebody can fool you. Somebody can say, well, your feelings have been wrong before. You can't just trust your feelings or your wishful thinking, or I feel that it's hopeful. I feel the world is benevolent. Well, it's a little more complicated than that. Maybe it's a little messier. So get into your own cognitive dissonance, your own level of fearing it might be something darker than you think. Not because you have to lose hope or become a cynic, but because your hope is manipulated, and your fear is manipulated, and your blame and guilt complexes are manipulated. All of these things are manipulated because they have been identified, they have been tagged. Flags of behavior have been tagged on the individual, and especially the statistical level. The statistical level is an approximation of what goes on in group thinking. So we can use all of this because it is an approximation to the think tanks and those people with the equations. This is not an exact science, even now. So again, I take this whole talk and I'm expressing the fact that I don't believe that all of a sudden these people are arrested by these other people that somehow have to stop because the bad guys are making it difficult for them. Because why? Because they control the money. What do you mean they control the money? Or they control this, or we have to abide by the rules. What rules? You mean the cops? They come and arrest somebody, there's a constitution. So, but if there's evidence against you, which clearly here there is, the cops arrest you. On a good day, let's say there's no conspiracy, whatever. They go, oh, you've committed a crime.
Well, I was arrested for driving without a license, and I was sleeping in my bed at the time.
Yeah. So over here on the large scale, they say, oh, but these people own the banks and we can't let the banks collapse. And I remember the ambassador saying when I asked him something, I can't quote verbatim, but he said basically, well, you know, we will, this is how I took it. He said, well, if we take these people down, we're going to lose our power. We can't take them down without taking ourselves down because we're all in bed together. We're all tied. So even though we're not the bad guys, we're the good guys, these bad guys are all working through a system that benefits us. We don't want that system to go down. Well, why can't you replace them? No, because they're the ones that own the system and they should be that because that's their thing. You know, this is bullshit. Bullshit. I call bullshit on all of it, okay? That's it, you know, and so people are afraid to call bullshit because then what? Oh, it's, you know, look, the thing is, you can't really figure out the then what until you finally face the fact that you are being used on an alleged chessboard. Then you can go about the long and drawn out process of understanding who your enemy is and what your enemy is. And because there are many of us, see, we can actually, we don't even have to work together. I mean, naturally, some people are more inclined towards seeing this scientifically, some people mathematically, some people poetically, some people metaphorically, some people spiritually. We don't need memes. We all each have our own dispositions. All we need is to encourage each other off the record to do this on our own and not provide the details. And if we come up with a conclusion that can be shared, if and when, which we can learn to share it in a way that does not reveal everything, okay? Or with people next to us, or in some way where the bits and pieces can fly out. You see, you can use the fact that this chaotic information stream is very difficult to, you know, you pick up data. How do you know which data is good and which data is useless? You really don't. You're looking for specific patterns. But if people try to figure shit out and do it in their own way creatively and spit the data out without expressly, you know, in a creative fashion, put it this way, many teachers in the old days used to express their teachings through fairy tales, through myths, through symbolism, through poetry. Other scientific dynamics can also become out neutral. Oh, certain human behaviors, this and that. I don't have to spell it out. We are each creative. We will find a way. The point is, as I always say, first reclaim your noggin. You already have your heart. If your heart's in the right place, it means you are willing to stand up to this. You're not going to give up. You're not one of them, so to speak, but you're also not one of their victims. You know, let's not blame the victim, but let's not be the victim. Being the victim, there's two kinds of victims. The one is explicit. Okay, so we're all explicit victims in a way because we're all part of the system, so to speak. And then there's the implicit victimization, or maybe it's the other way around. But we're victims in our own minds. You know, oh, I'm a victim. You know, and I have victim privilege, so I get to bitch. But you know, and I get to maybe in conversations I can dominate people because I'm a victim and you can't blame me. Or
that's actually happening with some of the minorities, so-called, in the United States, and I'm sure in other parts of the world as well, where they set up these minority classes, and you've been victimized, so now you've got to lash out against the victimizers, and that's part of the mind control scenario that they've created with people that are willing to think inside the box, whether they've been pushed or not.
We've found many people, you know, and again, I will step back from the whole race thing because, you know, they can make it whatever they want, but there are people in every single group who love to dominate the conversation or the ideological presentation. If you look at communist countries, there's people that came back and said, yes, the party would infuse people who would create scenarios and divide and conquer. And there were always normal people who got off on this. And they ended up being the traitors in the end. They ratted out everybody else, not for money, but just because they could be important. Because the party would say, yes, here, have a medal and do whatever. You know, and there was also compensation. Or they got to see their neighbors who they envy get screwed. So there's a whole bunch of things that somebody who's full of resentment, you just give them a gun and they don't care who they shoot. They just want to shoot somebody. Just give them a general image of what they can hate. You know, whether it's so-called, it's not, there's no such thing as reverse racism. It's all racism, you know, and it's not even racism. It's simple hatred. It's the system that is
psychopathy.
Well, it's the system that's suppressing you. You know, the one that's tormenting you, that's enslaving you, is giving you permission to lash out against the ones who are also suppressed. But maybe their grandparents were less suppressed than you, or their parents, or maybe in their life now. But the ones who are actually doing it, these folks, they're not one race. They're all races. You heard the ambassadors say, well, royalty just spans the globe. It's one big happy family. You know, we're all married with each other, so, you know, there is no color. There is no, you know, he was right. I agreed with him. I believed him. That's one of the things I was like, well, this guy's actually very clever because he's mixing bullshit with things that are probably very true. Of course they would mix. You know, the one thing that is historically true is that when a people, when a king meets another empire to whatever, they will send ambassadors and they will create relations. And eventually, if relations are good, they'll want to create a marriage. Marriage is the best alliance, you know, either through some lesser nobility or some greater nobility. Eventually, the gene pools would mix. And somebody with mixed gene pools would have claims to both thrones. And then you have a bigger empire. That's how these things sometimes work out. So of course it happens. But then they can't do that if they're racist. That's for us. Racism is for us. The fact that they had slaves from Africa was a convenience for them. It wasn't just because, you know, they could, you know, it was easy. They just took them from one continent, brought them to another because the natives would die. The natives couldn't, you know, they would just sit in the field and just until they'd starve to death. They wouldn't work. Okay. So I don't want to get into this issue. This is a whole other issue because then you have people and then they spit cliches out. And how do they spit these cliches? Well, if you go on the internet, you see sites that tell you how to create arguments, rhetoric. You know, and you say, well, these are just facts. You know, you have the ad hominems, you have the thises, the that's, and, you know, learn how to argue with other people, how to debate. You know, well, that's true. Yes, of course. But at the same time, if somebody wanted the liar or the person with some kind of agenda to be able to argue, they would train them. And they would train everybody. And it's a free-for-all. So the result is chaos and more chaos. That's why I'm saying
how the world has been in our lifetime and before that.
Well, there's chaos and then there's order. And order is usually tyranny. Sometimes I prefer the chaos. But really, the chaos is good when it actually transforms something, not when it destroys it. Chaos is supposed to be a transformational thing. You eat your food, you digest it, it's chaotic, and then the nutrients are separated, and then you're healthy. You get nutrified, so to speak, whatever. But the whole point is that the Psy-Op chess game is what is going on. It is going on. I mean, even if you don't agree that these latest newscasts are part of the Psy-Op chess game, it is still going on somewhere, somehow. So all of a sudden, a president is elected, and all of a sudden, this one candidate who happened to be very, very powerful and influential in this started tripping all over herself, peeing her underwear, being on drugs, being filmed with crazy bug-eyed expressions. I'm talking about Hillary. And all of a sudden, everybody who would have voted for her, oh my God, look at that terrible person. And they didn't, and they voted for this other guy. Maybe that was a test. Was that a mistake in a world that's calculated? Personally, I was really hoping that woman would not be president. But the point is that if that woman was president, she would have been probably doing far worse things. People would not have been reacting as they do so dramatically, but under the radar, you would have had all of these folks who are already conservative starting to figure out something else because they would have been pushed to a corner. Now their guy is allegedly on the pedestal, and so their guy is the target publicly, so they're publicly coming out, trying to be on the defensive instead of the offensive. And the majority of socially justified who knows what's former victims are all coming out. Just when the pedophiles are going to have a spotlight, you have molested women come out. And yes, that's really nasty and it should come out, and Me Too and this and that. But, what about the children? When does the child say Me Too? And, all of these things are very sensitive, and people are always like this, always. And then the same people that are like all the time, whenever you try to show some passion, they go, calm down, calm down, quiet, So there's people have learned manipulation because it's nice to manipulate. All of these innocent people, these victims, all of us who are just little plebes have learned to get up and be important because of this information stream instead of thinking intelligently. Now, I've ranted chaotically here because I wasn't prepared as usual. I probably will never be prepared for our talks, Ron, but I will always speak passionately. And I always try to point out this because I'm a statistic, and possibly I'll have 100 viewers or 150 viewers. It doesn't matter, maybe 200. What matters is that those few people perhaps might think about these things, and perhaps they might see somebody else who will also encourage them to think about these things, because that's what we need to do instead of digesting undigestible, prefabricated, artificial information, some of which may be true, some of which may not be. But unless you're willing to go out and do something about that shooter who allegedly is not real or whatever, just store it away as a factoid and see how it connects with everything else until you can figure out what you can do and how you can do it and what you can present, because we all can have a part to play if we so choose and creatively think that way. But we have to extract ourselves from the chess game, at least in our own minds. That's it. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Aristo, and namaste.
Namaste, Ron.